I think the development of full artificial intelligence would spell the end of the human race.
It's a flying object and we don't know what it is. I would hope somebody is checking it out.
It was a rocket or whatever, but incredibly fast, opposite direction. It was too fast to be an airplane.
I'm glad the Pentagon is looking at this, because if it poses a threat, I want them on top of it.
Well, the craft generates its own gravitational field.
You said there's lights in the sky?
The internet has become the command center for criminals and terrorists.
911, what's your emergency? I need help, please help me!
Well, they won't let it happen. You know, that's what we're instructed to say.
Roswell, Area 51. Alien kept deep under the ground.
1, 0, 1, 1, 1, 0, 1, 1, 6, 3, 2, 9, 7.
Media doesn't have your best interest in mind. The government is self-serving. You're here for a reason. You're listening to Troubled Minds Radio. Broadcasting live from a secret bunker just off the extraterrestrial highway. Somewhere in the desert sands outside of Las Vegas. From somewhere in space-time, loosely labeled Generation X on planet Earth. And asking questions of you in earnest into the digital darkness.
Well, good evening, everybody. Welcome to Troubled Minds Radio. I am your host, Michael Strange. I am here with your co-host, Frank Pierce. And we would like to say hello to all of you who might also have troubled minds. We are recording this show live, as we always do. If you'd like to be on the show, the numbers to call, 702-957-1037. One more time, 702-957-1037. We've also got Discord open and available, so if you'd like to be on the show that way, click the link in the Facebook stream, and it'll bring you straight into Discord, and we'll pull you on the show. We'll talk about some cool things. We're going to talk about some more cool things. We've kind of trying to run the gamut here to start, but we've been through some conspiracy theory. We've been through some alien abductions. We've been through Bigfoot. We've been through, man, what haven't we been through? We've been through all kinds of things. Aliens on Mars. We've been through Mars and back to the moon, etc. So, yeah. If you guys have been familiar with the show, you know we've run through a bunch of this stuff, and a lot of you have been through the journey with us. We appreciate that. And this one tonight, we're going to be talking about deep underground bases and some of the actual shenanigans that have gone down. At least we'll just drop this at the beginning and just say reportedly. Okay, so there's going to be some pretty amazing stuff we talk about tonight. But so we made this show because we like asking questions, and we think that there's a lot of things that the mainstream media, that the institutions that be, the big corporations, the what we call academia, I guess would be the word I'm looking for. We hate how they kind of are the arbiters of truth today. They tell us what's true and what's not true. They put up the little Wikipedia blurb on the YouTube video to make sure that you don't think outside the box, because they don't like outside the box. Couple shout outs. I got people in chat before we get to Frank here. Russell, what's up? Fred, Keith, Todd, Brian, Russell, Appreciate you guys coming back. It means a lot. And yeah, so per usual, we're going to do some news before we get into some of these underground bases and some of the shenanigans that happen, because there are some shenanigans. We're going to get into some aliens again today. So we'll get there. But as for right now, right this second, we're not going to do aliens. Well, maybe. I haven't done the DNA test, but you never know. You never know. Things surprise you every day. But with that said, ladies and gentlemen, your co-host, Frank Pierce.
Apparently I'm an alien. Okay. Well, as an alien, this is our show. So we go through all the documents. We go through the news, we go through history, we go through mythology, we go through science, we look at the papers, we read forum posts. But more importantly, and what we're hoping to develop the show into, is your input. We want to go through your input. So if you have input, email us troubledmindsradio@gmail.com. Join our Discord. Talk to us. If you have a story about an underground cave experience, that's what we're talking about today, then join up or call the number. We'll mention it a few more times through the show. Or just leave a comment and chat, and we'll go through it and we'll read it. But yeah, we want to integrate all these different sources of information and try to pull out a narrative, something that makes sense. There's so much misinformation and naysaying out there by the I think we'll go through this in a minute, but I was reading CNN today, and they're just we'll go through that in a minute. But needless to say, the news is not news anymore. It's an agenda-driven process. So that's a show. We want to look at more sources than just the news and try to form our own opinions, and hopefully you can help us do that.
Right, absolutely. So as you guys are used to, if you've been following, we're going to do a little bit of news, and then we'll get into the topic tonight. And as most of you are aware, we've been talking about it quite a lot. It is the end of July. Today, matter of fact, what day is it? July 29th. And July is Mars month, and it's Mars month for a reason. So coming at you with some more Mars news. Specifically, let's see. We've been talking about Mars and how it's going to be the closest in the night sky it's been in, let's see, I got the actual stats here. I got the actual NASA stats. Okay, so this Mars close approach is the closest since or the closest until 2020. But previously, let's see, where is this? I got the stats, but I can't find it. There we go. So all these factors mean that not all close encounters are equal. It says in 2003, Mars made its closest approach to Earth in nearly 60,000 years. And so this close approach is almost equal to that. And it won't be this close again until the year 2287, it says right here on the NASA page. So if you guys haven't been outside, if you guys haven't seen Mars, if you guys haven't done any of that, I recommend it. It's nice and bright, nice and beautiful. I hope you don't have clouds to get in the way. But Mars is looking good right now. It's all dolled up, ready to go to the prom. So if you got super sweet ways to capture pictures of it, I've seen some nice pictures. People are out there doing their astronomy telescope picture type thing, and there's been some nice images come out of it. So maybe after this is all done and the approach is over, I think it's the 31st is going to be the day. So it's super bright now, and it's just getting brighter for the next day or two. So keep your eyes to the sky. Definitely exciting stuff. But yeah. So Mars is close. Mars looks good. And since it is Mars month, we've got more Mars news. So what do you got there, Frank? I got your articles up here.
Yeah, let me go into this CNN piece that really kind of got my goat today. And I was reading this. So this is an opinion piece in reference to the news we heard last week. So in case you're not familiar, they found a massive underground lake on Mars with liquid water. And they did that through the European Space Agency satellite. And this blowhard on CNN here, he comes along and he says, well, doesn't really matter because we've suspected they've had water on Mars for a long time, and it's still not, I'm just giving a summary here, but this guy's saying it's still not practical to go. It's going to take too much money to drill. And this massive discovery that everyone was shocked about last week is, it's not really a big deal. And so this is an opinion piece. Let me read this guy's bio real quick. Yeah, so he's a senior scientist at the National Accelerator Laboratory. So basically, he's not an astronomer. He's not an astronaut. He is a physicist. And he's taking this news of water on Mars and he's basically telling everyone it's not important at all, where in fact it's the complete opposite. Having water on Mars is drinking water for astronauts. It's fuel to turn into energy. Using that fuel, you can, smelt metals and build bases and all this kind of stuff.
Oops.
Oh, you got an autoplay going. Yeah. And so basically, this fucking...
Sorry, go ahead.
Pardon my language. I just let an obscenity come out. But yeah, opinion pieces like this are ridiculous. Like, we should be looking for hope towards the future. We should be, searching for optimism. And guys like this come along and people read this and they'll form their opinions. But this discovery last week was massive. It was amazing. And this guy comes down and just shuts it down entirely. So this kind of journalism really gets to me, where they just want to find the negative in everything and they never look for the positive. Anyway, that's my news. That's one of my news stories.
Okay, so CNN says nothing to see here. And then they want to get back to Russia.
Essentially, nothing to see here.
Russia. All right. So thanks, CNN. You're the best. All right. I got the Anderson Cooper pop-up and everything. All right. So another one. So we've been watching news, or the Mars news, pretty close over the last few weeks, as you guys are aware of. And again, the news is like this roller coaster of information. It's like first there's life, then there's no life, then there's no life in the universe because Kurzweil's correct, or not Kurzweil. What's the guy's name? What's the theory? Anyway, so they say there's life, then there's no life, then we're alone in the universe, then we're not, and then we are, and then we're not again, and it just keeps like flip-flopping. So here we go. We got some more. This was in March, actually. I just dug this up, so this probably kicked off the entire thing. But possible fatty acid detected on Mars. So that's more evidence of organics here. I'm not sure how this one slipped by us or what was going on in March. Maybe we hadn't started the show yet. That's probably it. But it seems like it's like another nail in the coffin on actual life on Mars. I mean, we've got methane. We've got what do we got? We've got all kinds of stuff. We got organics in the soil. We've got fatty acids. We've got now liquid water in a lake on Mars. I mean, what do they want? Do they literally want to see Martians, like native Martians, walking around? Is that I mean, I know you got to kind of have a definitive, but I mean, it's still like nothing to see here. CNN says nothing to see here.
You know what? I'm beginning to suspect that even if they saw like living trees on Mars and like little creatures roaming around, someone would come out of the woodwork and say, "Oh, big deal. We knew about that already. There's no point in going anyway. Don't worry about it. Worry about politics. Worry about paying your taxes. Don't worry about going to Mars. It's not worth it. We can't do it. We can't afford it. Don't worry about it. Think what you want us to, or think what we tell you to." And that's the theme I'm getting here from a lot of these news stories.
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure. A couple more shout outs. We got Allie. We got Kelly. I think I missed Mike. What's up, guys? Thanks for showing up. So more Mars. We got flip-flops. And I guess the only thing that's gonna make like news, like worldwide news, is if we get images of a Martian, like a native, just kind of going out for a walk, maybe coming out from the underground tunnels, and then doing that sort of thing. It sure seems like that's what it's gonna take for. We have bigger and bigger news on Mars almost every single day now, and it's downplayed. Thanks, Dr. CNN. You're the best. So whatever that guy's name was. But yeah, so
I don't want to sound like a totalitarian fascist, but round up some criminals, then send them to Mars, and they'll do what they have to do. Like, I think we're at that point.
We're gonna,
Like, let's just go.
I got an idea. Let's make I'm piggybacking. So we'll make Mars the new Australia. So you get sentenced to more than 30 years in prison. Boom, to Mars you go. You get fitted for a spacesuit instead of a prison stripes. Off you go with the pickaxe. Yeah. So interesting. Why are we not there? Or why are there people saying we've been there or could have been there? Yeah, there's a lot of Mars information bouncing around. Did you see this other one reported by Engadget? And they had a contest to see who could create what an actual habitat on Mars would look like. So they've got all the finalists here, and I'm scrolling through them so you can see real quick. And again, we'll have the everything, as always, is going to be linked on troubledminds.org. So if you guys want to check these links out, we'll have them there, and you can check it out. But yeah, it looks like I think that's just an artist rendition, but they got some other cool stuff here. Looks like a candle with legs or something. I don't know what that is, but
the interesting part about this story is that these are all based on 3D printed architecture. So the idea being they would send some kind of device, a big machine, and that device could then churn out these 3D printed structures that we're seeing. So it is quite interesting to see all the different designs and stuff that could be made autonomously. So you send a thing there to prepare ahead of time, and it builds all these living cavities and living bases that astronauts could go to. But it is quite interesting to see these designs. Apparently there was a $100,000 cash prize for whoever could design the best. So I think the results are coming out, and these are just the finalists. But it's pretty interesting. This is the kind of hopeful stuff that I like to see, that they're actually planning and preparing and getting ready to go.
Right, positive stuff here. So the 5 finalist teams split $100,000 cash, and I think the next challenge is they'll have to build a 1/3 scale. So right there on the headline. So it goes from like a small prototypes to actually gonna have to build this thing at scale and see if it'll actually work. So the contest continues. But yeah, good stuff. So from the CNN to the positive here. Thanks Engadget for reporting something cool and not something lame about Mars. Got a couple comments real quick. Ali says, wonder what they're hiding up there. That's the only real reason I can think of that they always downplay it so hard, and that's totally legit. If you haven't seen our Mars episodes, we've done a couple. Go back and look, and there's some sketchy stuff. We got satellite images of some things that look very, very, very suspicious. So possibly NASA, never a straight answer, hiding some things. It sure seems like it. And then Todd says the face on Mars says all that needs to be said. And yeah, we do. We in our Mars episode we take a closer look at that and yeah, some other things. Let's see. So we got that. All right. And then so interestingly, to kind of match the Mars action happening here with actual habitats, there's an article reported by inverse.com, and they're talking about how to actually grow crops on Mars. So you figure if you're going to send people there, it'd be important to maybe feed them, keep the action happening. The people living and breathing, etc. It'd probably be more of a happy ending type of thing. But they're talking about the recent discovery of liquid water on Mars, and then how that could actually impact their food supply and where they get it. So they're talking about using microbes as a source of food on Mars with hydroponic greenhouses, and I guess it's similar to the one being tested on board the International Space Station. Yeah, so did you see this one, Frank?
Yeah, it's interesting because, you don't expect to go to Mars and eat, fresh apples and peaches. That's not going to happen. But big vats of algae that grow, or big vats of yeast growing, and then the yeast or algae is extracted and compressed into a mush bar. That'd be good for the criminals we want to send there, I think. So we could definitely do it. All you need for that is sunlight, which we have sunlight, and water, which now we have water. So these things grow by themselves, basically. And algae, of course, makes oxygen. from carbon dioxide. So that would be, again, another source of materials and things that they could need to sustain themselves on Mars. Yeah, so it is easy to make food, not good food, but it is easy to make food with microbes and algae and yeast and so on and so forth, so long as you have water.
There you go. So that's all of the things that you would need, huh? So I guess we're going to name this new colony Mars Australia. Does that sound right?
Sounds good to me.
Does that work?
Like,
okay.
Really, like, we just need some direction, I think, from the top. And this is probably the fourth time I've said this, but Trump needs to fire NASA, fire all of them, and put in people who actually want to do something. Put in people that actually say, okay, we're going there by 5 years, and then they do what they need to do to get there 5 years from now. Like, actually plan for success instead of planning for failure. Like, stop being so cautious and actually just go and do it.
Right, exactly. Quick shout out to Matt. Thanks for showing up, buddy. Yeah, it's interesting that you get private industry now, SpaceX and some others that are kind of barking up their tree. Like, they're the actual ones who are supposed to save us, right? The evil capitalism is to the rescue because the government just can't get their shit together. Which is kind of interesting when when you look at the news cycles and what's going on here. But the government has all the resources. They tax the hell out of us, and then they can't do some of the most obvious things. I mean, we're still talking about a base on the moon. If they have one, they haven't disclosed it. We're still talking about getting people to Mars. I mean, I've seen all kinds of news recently. I'll pull this up for next time, but they're working on some kind of engine that can get to Mars in 39 days. Did you see that one? It's like, damn, that is fast.
Didn't see that one, but that's quite fast. Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah. So I mean, apparently, it was one of those things where it's in like prototype testing, initial government funding. I'll pull it up for next time, so I have actual details. But it sure seems like we have a lot of the technology to make this stuff happen, and it's just not happening. It's not happening fast enough. We'd rather worry about all the other BS that they want us to worry about. And I don't even need to tell you what it is. Just turn on the TV, and you'll see what's going on.
Going back to our last episode, which was mind control, this seems like mind control to me, honestly, because the public wants to go to Mars. Everyone I know wants to go to Mars. We want people in space. We want people on the moon. We want people going to Mars. And so then they use their media, their mind control, to basically tell us, oh, worry about Russia. Worry about Donald Trump. Worry about North Korea. Worry about all this other stuff. And they kind of distract us from things. But I think if everyone bands together and decides that, yeah, we want to go to Mars, well, then we'll be there in no time at all.
Yeah, it's not a matter of technology at this point. It's a matter of having the will. Everybody remembers the what was the JFK speech? We do not do these things because they're easy. We do them because they're hard. Everybody remember that? It's a good speech. I make fun because I can't do a good JFK, but that was a good speech. And that's completely true. Like, if we have a will to make these things happen. So, yeah. Cheers. Here's to Mars. Let's get there. Let's make it Mars Australia and the new prison colony. Sounds like a good idea to me. All right, so there's Mars. So if you guys haven't seen it, again, I highly recommend go outside, take a look. It's gonna be better than it's gonna be for years to come. So get out there. Don't be afraid. Bring the tinfoil if you need it, but take a look. It's been nice. I've been making a point to go out each night and take a good look and make sure that I don't forget, because it's going to be gone shortly. We're gone enough anyway, so it doesn't look so nice. All right, so anything else on the news there, Frank, before we jump onto the topic?
No, that's it. Let's get into our topic today, which is deep underground military bases.
Right. So that's what a D.U.m.b. is. D.U.M.B. That's what they're called. That's the abbreviation. So deep underground military bases. Now, it's probably if we're talking about military, like actually underground military bases, we're talking about places like Area 51, Groom Lake, some of the most obvious places that super secret stuff has been happening for quite a long time. But there's some other, let's say, alleged underground military bases that may be bases, they may not be bases. We've got some interesting stuff. Okay, so all right, so in America alone, there are over 120 deep underground military bases. So that's the number, over 120. But and worldwide, I didn't get a worldwide number, but apparently there's a ton of them all over the place. And they're under most cities, U.S. Air Force bases, Navy bases, Army bases, and of course the fabled FEMA military training camps, and the DHS control centers, which of course is the Department of Homeland Security. Weren't we talking about Walmarts a while back for something like that?
Yeah, that was the running theory, is that there's these massive tunnels underneath Walmarts, and when the apocalypse comes or they enact Agenda 21, they're going to, corral all the people into these Walmarts and set them up as FEMA camps. And, they're built that way. They have the towers, the guard towers on the outside, that, of course, they have advertising on them now, but the idea would be convert them into guard towers. And apparently there's tunnels underneath them, running back and forth and connecting cities together. Or that's what they say anyway, but it's hard to get a straight answer on this kind of stuff. Yeah,
absolutely. And okay, so have you guys heard of any deep underground military bases? Let us know, because we're gonna go through some here, and of course Area 51. But if you guys know one, maybe close to you, go ahead.
Yeah, let me interject in a moment, and let's talk about maybe the technology first. So it's this, what we're talking about. It may be hard to believe that these things are real, that the government has created these massive underground facilities, but it is very real, and these things do exist because they're easy to make, quite frankly. We make them all the time. We make tunnels under mountains. We make big underground bases for the government to survive in, should nuclear war start. So do you think we should go into that, talk about some of the technology, and then we'll get into the story?
Yeah, perfect. Real quick, couple comments here to catch up on. Todd says, I think, going back to Mars, I think one of the main reasons we will probably never get off the planet is because once we start space travel on a real scale, money and government will become insignificant. And I think there's a bunch of truth to that, because what happens once we do start harvesting the asteroid belt and maybe some actual other planets? What happens? I mean, the resources on Earth we've been fighting over for so long literally become insignificant. All of the things that the governments are trying to protect now, it's like opening up the floodgates. It's like I think that's a great comment. Smart, very smart. And the governments are scared of that for sure. They want to be able to control the power, and especially if we get private industry up there. I mean, I don't think anybody would argue, anybody that actually thinks about these things, like that private industry already runs the world as it is. The gigantic mega corporations. Like, these guys run the place anyway, but imagine when, let's say, Google or SpaceX or one of these places actually gets some kind of craft up there mining the asteroid belt. I mean, if they're not powerful now, like, holy crap. Like, what kind of, literally, like a galactic power would they become? I guess that's the best way to put it. But yeah. So anyway, great comment. And Todd follows up again with the Dulce underground battle with the Greys. I think he's been snooping on us. We'll get there. Kelly says the face on Mars. His name is let me say this right. Alalulu. The first Nibiru king to die off planet. Okay. That's new. We're gonna have to look that up. If you got information on that, give us a call. We'd love to hear it. 702-957-1037. We'll put you on the stream with us, and you can tell us a little bit about that, and maybe tell me how to say it. That would be cool. But yeah, great comment. And then let's see. Todd says, been trying to get them to do a show on the Lost Book of Winky. Don't know what that is. We will. Enki. Oh, I know what that is. He wears an eagle's helmet, says Kelly, following up on the Nibiru King. Todd, well, they call it eagle's helmet, but I'm not sure it's really an eagle. Oh, like an eagle. I thought you meant like the Philadelphia Eagles. Shows you where my head's at. No, okay. So, and then Todd, again, if we leave people actually find a habitat world, why would they come back to Earth? Well, I think that's part of it too. Once we go, we become the aliens, right? So we become the galactic pioneers. We're the actual scary race that might dominate the galaxy. So once we leave the planet, yeah, exactly. I don't think there's a reason to come back, right? For a lot of those people, it's like your prosperity here is what you make here. But if you live there, your prosperity becomes what happens there, right, Frank? I mean,
yeah, it's interesting to think that the first person to tow back an asteroid filled with platinum and rare earth metals, the first person to do that will have the equivalent of the GDP of the entire world 100 times over, and they can buy and sell countries like candy because there's just so much value in those things. And what's the government going to do when that one guy tows that asteroid back? Well, they're either not going to let them get there in the first place, or they're going to take it from them when they do eventually bring it back. Like they just can't let someone have that much power.
Right, exactly, and that's where the brakes, where they hit the brakes. They're scared of that because they completely have to hand it off, literally, to somebody like Elon Musk or Sergey from Google or Tim Cook or guys like that. They literally have to hand the reins. Literally, here's the reins to the world and how the world goes from now on. And yeah. We all know the government can't have that. So a couple more follow-ups, and then we'll get into the technology here, Frank. Kelly says, or a fish suit, still talking about the guy on Mars. And Todd says that's misinterpretation of technology. And then Kelly follows up with, it's a book called The Lost Book of Enki, which I've heard of. It was a typo that I read, which is why I hadn't heard of the typo version of that book. But yeah, we'll get there. We'll get there one day. All right. We can only do so much so fast. But we appreciate that you guys are sticking in there and enjoying this and bringing new topics, because this is exactly why we did this. Because some of the things that we haven't heard of, some of the things that we may not touch, if it's what you want to hear, that's what we're going to do. So, all right. Ali, another comment, but we'll go after you, Frank. Hit it.
Yeah, so it's interesting to think that there's these massive underground facilities, and it seems a bit fantastical to think of that there's these huge tunnel systems connecting cities, and that there's huge large underground caverns with entire cities built into them. And it seems crazy, it seems fantastical and absurd to think about it that way, but the reality is we have the technology to do all these things, and they're being done on a daily basis. So there's two things, and again, this is just to preface the crazy kind of stories coming up soon, is that we do have the technology. So there's two things we need, basically, to do this kind of work. And one is a system to make tunnels to connect all these things, and the existence of already established underground caverns and bases and big cave systems that are there already. And I think it would surprise people. Do we have that picture of that cave system? Let's pull that up.
We do.
Yeah, so this is a huge, massive cave system. So it's known as the Kruber-Voyana cave, known as the Everest Caves. So the total length of the passages is nearly 13 kilometers. The deepest part explored is 2,000 kilometers. And the difference in elevation from the cave's entrance to the deepest point is nearly 2,000 meters. So this thing is huge. It's massive. The volume inside is absolutely crazy. It's multiple times the size of the Eiffel Tower. And using systems like this that are already in place, this is how they build these underground bases. They take these things, they find them, they excavate down into them, and then they just widen them. So much of the work is done for them already. And this cave system is particularly fascinating because it took nearly 40 years to explore the entire thing. And there are still branches off this cave system that no one's ever gone into. And we're talking about huge, huge areas here. Like if we're looking at this picture, it's an absolutely massive system. So it's easy to believe that the government or a military could come and tunnel down into the system and then expand it and start putting facilities inside it. It's very easy to imagine that. Now, the second thing we need to do all this is some kind of excavating equipment, some kind of means to build these tunnels. And in fact, we have that already. There's these massive tunnel boring machines. So I think we have a clip that kind of explains the operation of a tunnel boring machine. Let's play that, and then let's talk about it afterwards.
We want the video or the audio?
the audio.
Meet Alice, the Evergreen Line's tunnel boring machine, or TBM, shown here during her testing and commissioning. During tunnel boring, the cutter tools on the face of the TBM loosen the soil, which moves into this chamber behind the TBM face, and is then removed by a screw conveyor. Monitored carefully in the control room, the material moves along a conveyor belt through the TBM, continuing all the way through the tunnel along the top, beside the white tube, which is a ventilation system during construction. Emerging at the tunnel workyard, a second conveyor deposits the material in a pit beside the Barnett Highway in Port Moody. The spoils are then trucked away to an approved disposal site. Meanwhile, prefabricated reinforced concrete tunnel liner rings are being moved inside the tunnel. The 8 sections that make up a complete ring are loaded on the Specialized Mine Service Vehicle, or MSV, for the trip. The MSV has a driving cab at both ends, so it never turns around and always goes forward. First, going through the transition tunnel under the Barnett Highway, and then through the TBM assembly and launch area, the MSV enters the bored tunnel and travels up to the tunnel boring machine's backup assembly. One at a time, the ring segments are taken from the MSV and are transported by a complex system of lifts and conveyors through the TBM's backup systems all the way to the ring erector system. With tunnel boring paused for the next ring assembly, ring erector uses a vacuum to pick up the concrete ring sections and move them into position for installation. But before the ring segment can be installed, the heavy-duty jacks that hold the segments in place need to be retracted. The final of the 8 ring segments to be installed is the smaller key segment. Once in place, it locks all the rings into position. Bolts are then used, tightening the seal between the segments for grouting. Pumps then inject grout outside the tunnel to fill any gap between the rings and the ground outside. After monitoring the ring installation from the control room, it's time to start boring again. Each of the green circles on the monitor represent the hydraulic jacks around the circumference of the TBM. By pushing off the concrete ring, the TBM starts moving again. Operators can adjust individual jack pressure to steer Alice, keeping her on course. The Evergreen Line, opening fall 2016.
All right. If anybody just felt like they were the substitute teacher watching a film in school, raise your hand and make a comment. Couple comments to catch you on real quick, Frank. Ali says, we'll be brine shrimp in an ocean of sharks if we ever make it off the planet because of how many other races are already out there. So, yeah, and since before human existence. And Fred says, exactly it. The government doesn't want to lose control. And Kelly says, good show so far. We are new to the show. So, thank you. That feedback is fantastic. Thank you for being new. Thank you for the feedback. All feedback is good. But, yeah, so the actual drilling mechanism. Go ahead, Frank. My bad.
Yeah, so these things are commercially available. They use them to build tunnels and railways all the time. As I finish talking about this, why don't you pull up that video and loop it a few times? So that sound clip, it probably sounded like a lot of technical jargon. Actually, yeah, if you can pull that video up and just mute it, and you'll actually see what this thing looks like. It's absolutely amazing. It's basically a long cylindrical tube that has grinding wheels on the front. And it can chew through mountains, it can chew through the underground, and no problem at all. Basically, it just keeps going, keeps grinding away. All the waste rock is shuttled out the back of it. And then these concrete pads to reinforce the tunnel that's just being drilled is put in place around it. So we have these, do we have that video up?
Yeah, it's going. Running as you're speaking.
So you can see these massive teeth that just grind through the rock at an amazing pace. Like these things can mine out huge underground tunnels in no time at all. And so in conjunction with these cave systems they already have in place that are naturally formed, they can widen those out, and they can take one of these machines here and they can just connect them in no time at all. And then they have the rubble that's ejected out the back as a kind of building material, a substrate to use to make concrete and whatever else. And then they use that to reinforce these tunnel walls. So all these things are possible. All these things are reality. It's just a question of what they're used for. Is the government actually doing these things? And I would say yes, because they have these post-apocalyptic nuclear facilities all over the place where people can go to survive the apocalypse, should it happen.
This reminds me of Anybody seen Total Recall with Arnold, the original one? This totally looks like those huge boring machines that they had, kind of digging in the, through the crust of Mars, etc. It definitely has that kind of similarity, which is striking to me that it's not maybe not science fiction after all.
No, yeah, it's definitely a reality that they have these things. They use them for trains and road tunnels and things like that. So, as we get into some of the crazier topics, keep this in mind: is that everything to make these underground bases, we have them already, and they can do them whenever they want.
It exists. Okay, another comment from Kelly here. She says, "Now don't those newer tunnel drillers make its own concrete walls by melting the rocks and material?" And I think that's what you said there, Frank. Yeah, kick it out behind them and use that stuff for mortar and concrete and everything else, right?
Yeah, exactly.
All right, fantastic.
Okay, so why don't we let's, now that we've talked about kind of the engineering technology behind it, why don't we get into some of the government bases? I think you have some on that.
I do. Okay, so according to multiple sources here, they've been building these bases day and night unceasingly since the 1940s. These bases are basically large cities underground connected by high-speed magneto-levity trains that have speeds up to 1,500 miles an hour. And apparently that's how they travel in secrecy. There's Phil Schneider, which we'll get to, talks about these as it kind of sits on a like a magnetic track, like a quarter-inch above the actual track itself, and these things go some form of Mach. I'm not a great math guy, but 1,500 miles an hour is Mach 2? I don't know. I have no idea. I'm not a fighter pilot. You guys caught me. I'm not a fighter pilot. But fast. 1,500 mile an hour is fast. So several books have been written about this activity. Richard Sauter, a PhD architect, risked his life by talking about this stuff. He was an author of the book Underground Bases and Tunnels, What is the Government Trying to Hide? He worked with a number of government agencies on deep underground military bases. The average depth of these bases is over a mile. And they, again, are basically whole cities underground. They have nuclear-powered laser drilling machines that can drill a tunnel 7 miles long in one day. Now, with that technology, I think that's probably a little bit different than what we just saw, huh? It's not the same thing, right, Frank?
Well, that's always the way it works, is that the government has the better technology than the commercial sector. So those kind of grinding drills are maybe the old technology, and these newer ones are that they describe. I completely see it as feasible. Like, think about the stealth bomber, where they had that advanced technology when everyone else was running around in these rickety planes.
Japanese Zeros from 1942. Not that bad, but yeah, I got you. Okay, so I'm gonna say that one more time. Nuclear-powered laser drilling machines. So that seems a little more heavy-duty than what we were looking at. So interesting at least in that aspect of what was that? How many miles a day? 7 miles long in one day. That's a huge tunnel. So that would explain how they can get from one point to another with that huge train system. Okay, so now there's so many. So we went through a list of these and was like, okay, there's no way we can cover all this. So instead, we picked a few of the notable ones that I thought were interesting. Let's say. All right, let's see. So I'll get to Denver, but we've got a Canadian entrance. If anybody's heard of this one, it's in the Nahanni Valley in Canada. It supposedly covers 250 square miles on the southern end of the Mackenzie Mountains of Canada. It lies almost 550 miles due west of Fort Simpson and the Mackenzie River of northwest Canada. Hot springs and sulfur geysers keep the valley warmer than the surrounding areas by about 30 degrees year-round. The valley is above 60 degrees latitude, making it perpetually mist-covered. That's convenient for some hiding some stuff, hey? The valley is inhabited only by animals, as people entering the valley are usually found headless and quite dead. All right, this is reported by, you guys are going to love this one. It's ufos-aliens.co.uk. So there we go. There's my source. So you can't point to me and call me quackery. Not yet, anyway. Okay, so people end up dead. The Indian tribes of the area avoid this valley. These tribes include I can't say any of these names. We'll have the link to this so you can read it and pronounce them yourselves. The valley is often referred to as the Valley of the Headless Men. Seems interesting. Have you heard of that place, Frank?
I've never heard of it, but it is quite interesting, again, that these things seem to be all over the world, not just in America, but in all sorts of countries.
All right, fantastic. Anybody's heard of that one? Like to see comments. We got Mr. Producer helping out. 1,500 miles an hour in chat there is actually Mach 1.95. Thank you, Mr. Producer. And then he's making some fun out of me. That's okay. But so that's Mach 2. I think that actually fits with Phil Schneider said. So Mach 2 trains, that's pretty fantastic. How would you like that for your commute? Be pretty amazing.
Well, you know what that reminds me of instantly is this idea of the Hyperloop. Like, how does Elon Musk plan to build his Hyperloop? And I think it would go in much the same way that these things would go. They would drill these massive tunnels, put in these magneto rail systems, and there you go. You're from Los Angeles to San Francisco in no time at all.
Yeah, that would be sweet. You're no longer confined by your geological boundaries. You just hop on the train, boom. You're in London. I could have morning coffee before work. That'd be pretty sweet. All right, so that takes us actually to maybe not London, but let's say Staffordshire, England. Never been there. I hear it's a nice place. But somewhere in Staffordshire, a lonely field exists in which a laborer discovered a large iron plate beneath the dirt. The hatch was large and oval, with an iron ring mounted on it. This entrance led to the tunnels. The field is in a valley surrounded on almost all sides by woods. The laborer was digging a trench for some purpose, and this incident happened in a History of Staffordshire by Dr. Plott, who wrote the book in the late 1700s. So we're talking about some of these things that may not even be government facilities that go back so far. These might be actual underground, alien, extraterrestrial facilities that have been here for possibly millions of years. I've seen the X-Files. I've seen it. I know what's going on here. But it may be possible to find the entrance if it can be ascertained exactly which valley the laborer was digging in. Okay, so this was reported in the 1700s, and yeah, pretty interesting stuff there, huh? 1700s, a d.u.m.b. Right, George, shout out to George. And all right, cool. And then we got more. So that's we got Canada covered. We got England. We got some bases in the States too. So we're gonna go Mount Rainier, Washington State. They got them in California Death Valley, the Superstition Mountains, Mount Shasta. If anybody's been there, spent a lot of time growing up there. Very beautiful place. Mount Shasta specifically is interesting to me because ever since I was little, my grandmother was telling me it was kind of a hotbed for UFOs. And when I look into it, it seems to be that a lot of people say that's an old underground base from Lemuria, Lemuria. If anybody's heard of that one, Frank?
No, I've never heard of that. What's that involved with?
Well, it's so kind of in the vein of Atlantis. It's a like an super ancient civilization that was technologically advanced, at least tens of thousands of years ago, possibly up to millions. I'm not exactly sure what the time frame is there, but it's one of those rumored ancient civilizations where they were very into crystal technology, and they're talking about reading different levels of consciousness with crystals and out of body experience type stuff. And Edgar Cayce did a lot about that, which was a medium from the early 1900s. Which we should do that. We should do a show on that too. But yeah, so pretty interesting stuff. So all over the United States. So they also say that a very active UFO base exists beneath Mount Rainier. And there's also said to be underground vaults containing records of the ancient Lemurians. So, and there's a book about that by F.L. Boschke called The Unexplained, and it talks about the mysteries of surrounding Mount Rainier. So lots of places in the country, lots of places in different different everywhere, all over the world. It doesn't seem to be contained to.
Let me interject there, because there's a lot of these places that we know about, but there's a lot that they're still building, and that they hide from us. So I think we have a clip here that kind of explains one journalist how he accidentally discovered one of these bases, and we'll get to that in a second. But the important part is that they're building these things all the time. They're all over the place, and they're hiding them in out-of-the-way areas, in areas that, I guess the idea is that should a nuclear strike happen, what's gonna happen is that all the people will flock to these bases to try to survive. But the government doesn't want that. They only want to protect certain selected individuals. So they're kind of building these things in out-of-the-way places. Do we want to play that government clip?
Yeah, which one is it?
Government evacuation. So this kind of describes how one journalist accidentally found directions to one of these new bases they've built deep under the ground.
All right, here we go.
About 5 years ago, one of my colleagues at the magazine that I was working in came into the office one day with a government ID badge that he had found on the floor of the subway parking garage on his morning commute.
Ah.
And it was very clearly the badge of a U.S. intelligence officer. And he brought it into me and he said, I'll bet you can figure out how to get this back to this guy so that he, won't have lost his ID. And I turn over the ID and I'm looking at it, and there are driving directions on the back of the ID.
What?
That say long-term evacuation. And so I can tell that these lead out of Washington, out through Virginia, out into West Virginia. And so I get on Google Maps and Google Satellite and start following these driving directions. And I realize when I'm looking at the satellite view that they end in this mountain in West Virginia, where there's this road up the side of the mountain, and there's this chain link fence, there's a guard shack, and then about 50, 100 yards further down the road, you see just these massive concrete bunker doors, and the road disappears into the side of the mountain. And I'm looking at this and I was like, wow, like this is one of those new mountain bunkers that I've heard that they've been building since September 11th.
Oh, wow.
This was a facility that didn't exist on any map. I had never heard of it. And this whole thing out is still going on. And there are all these new facilities.
It's a little peculiar, don't you think? That they find a government badge and it's got driving directions on the back of it.
I don't think it's peculiar at all, really, because they want to, hide these things. And again, all the officials, they have their chain of command custody, such that should the president die, then this next person is in charge, and they have protected individuals. So you have to be a special person, and then you have access to these facilities should nuclear war erupt or some kind of massive cataclysm of some kind. And so, yeah, they're literally assigned to places to go should they need to survive in these underground facilities.
Okay. Agreed. You convinced me. A couple of Todd comments, because I've heard of that. He lived in Reading for a few years. Reading, of course, is where all the wildfires are right now. That whole town is burning down. It's not really much of a town, but it is up near Shasta. It's probably like I want to say a couple hours from Shasta, hour and a half. But yeah, nice area. So yeah. So I'm not totally crazy. He's heard it too, and he lived up there. And then Allie, don't forget Wright-Pat in Ohio. That's Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, of course, and that the underground tunnels go way further than what they report. And I think Wright-Patterson was where they isn't that where they, after the initial Roswell crash landing, they took the alleged extraterrestrial remains to Wright-Patterson? I think that's correct. Maybe
I believe so. And they took the not only the remains but all the metals they found. They took them there, and that's a whole nother story. We can get into that, but yeah, I think that's correct.
Okay, cool. All right, a couple more comments. We got Kelly says Utah as well. Dugway. I think we'll get to Dugway at least partially, and then Todd says, "Yeah, I'm with you, Todd." All right, so okay, where are we at? Help me out, Frank. Trying to catch up here.
Yeah, so there's all these bases. Now, here's the question. What are they being used for? So the official story is that there are these nuclear survival shelters that the government's going to go to in times of, panic and distress. But there's a lot of other suggestions as to what these things are used for. And I think you kind of hinted about that in the one in England, is that some of these things existed before the government was around to build them. And so, the official line again is that they're survival shelters, but a lot of people have come out of the woodwork and said that there might be a different reason for them. And so I think that ties into the Dulce base and everything else.
Okay. Before we get there, I got Denver real quick. But before we get to Denver, I want to shout out to Mount Shasta because I've been there, and it's, like I said, it's a beautiful place. So here's my blurb on Mount Shasta. Apparently there are tunnels beneath Mount Shasta that lead to a UFO base, as well as tunnels that connect with a vast worldwide tunnel network, which kind of fits in what we're talking about. And the Lemurian city Telos, Telos, is said to exist beneath Mount Shasta. William Hamilton has done much research on Mount Shasta and the tunnels, and he's privately published a book entitled Alien Magic. So if you guys are into that area, looking at you, Todd, that's one of the places you can go check it out. And go talk to some of the locals. Like I said, I grew up in the summers there with my grandparents, and some of the stories they told you, man, like they saw UFOs. One of those things where just kind of like out here, the bunker in Vegas, you see some bizarre things in the sky sometimes, and that's why I advocate going outside, because you will never see a UFO inside, and if you do, you're in big trouble.
Big trouble.
Yeah. All right, so there we go. So there's Shasta, and then all right. So now Denver. Now this gets crazy. All right, this gets crazy. So the Denver airport is reportedly a let's say, to sum up, an Illuminati stronghold. If anybody's heard of this, so there's supposedly like an underground tunnel system, and there are some that believe that the entire Denver airport was created specifically to cover this base. So they had the base set up, the underground, and they put the airport over top of it to allow one, quick access, of course, because it's an airport, and then two, kind of hide in plain sight type of thing. So we haven't really touched on the Illuminati yet, but it's one of those things where you probably ask 100 people, you get 100 different answers of what the Illuminati is. But here I got some stuff about Denver before we get to New Mexico. All right, a lot of notes here. All right. Okay, so Denver.
Just let me
go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, you're good.
Yeah, I just wanted to interject there and say that that's a theme that we keep seeing, is that they say these underground bases are for survival, but there's always these bizarre stories surrounding them, like lights in the sky or cattle mutilations nearby, and always strange figures and transport of equipment into them and out of them. That's why this is an interesting topic. It's not just that these things, it's not just the official story that these things are for survival, but there's always other weird stories around them, and that's where we're going with this. But yeah, let's keep going on the next one.
Okay, so Denver. There's a lot of the Denver stuff happening, and specifically because of some of the bizarre artwork. You guys have seen this. I'll put up some images here. We've got Denver. Let's see, Denver Airport. Here we go. All right, so this in particular is what's called a pale horse, and this is at the Denver airport, and it's largely attributed to an Illuminati symbol, let's say, and biblical. So if anybody's familiar with their Bible, their Sunday school teaching, we're going to go to chapter 6 of Revelation, and in which they talk about the fourth horseman of the apocalypse, which the fourth horseman is also known as death. And this is when the rapture is happening. This is when all the things like fire from the heavens and whatnot is going down. But here's the quote. And I looked, and behold, a pale horse, and his name that sat on him was Death, and hell followed with him, and power was given unto them over the fourth part of the earth, to kill with sword, and with hunger, and with death, and with the beasts of the earth. So there's your Bible passage for the day, if you guys haven't been keeping up. But it's a little bit creepy. Have you seen this picture, Frank, of the horse?
Yeah, so again, this is always the thing. It can never just be a boring airport. It can never just be like a metal doors leading into a mountain. They've always got to go the extra mile and put a blue, veiny horse with glowing red eyes in front of it. It's like they're trying to give it away, There's something real sinister and very creepy about this statue. And you have to wonder why they would put it there.
Well, and I think it's very explicit, short of a, maybe a white horse or a light gray horse. Like if you say pale horse, what do you imagine? I mean, with like glowing red eyes, a pale horse, that's straight out of the Bible right there. That's a little bit spooky, kind of shakes you a little bit. But there's a second view of it, less dramatic in the daytime, but you can see it's definitely a blue horse. It's definitely got some kind of flaming eye action going on, and it's got veins popping out its head, and looks like it's ready to bring down the life on Earth or whatever it is. So So okay, so there's a couple things. We got the first the horse. Now in the we're strictly talking about the Denver airport here and the alleged secret tunnels underneath, okay, which apparently have been set up with the Illuminati. One more time, we're recording this live. You guys are listening right now. 702-957-1037. We'd love to have you on the show. You can get on Discord. Any comments, any feedback is good. Got to drop it because we do like the feedback. So, all right, back to the Denver airport. So we got the pale horse here. Now, here's some other really crazy stuff that's painted inside this airport. Now, you can see this image. It's the Nazi-looking guy with the gas mask, maybe, and the big AK-47 and his sword. Have you seen that one, Frank?
Yeah, it's crazy, and the ruined buildings that he's standing beside that are on fire. Like, it's amazing that they would put this of all things in an airport, especially with the current political climate. We're all afraid of bombs and terrorists and whatnot. But here we have this guy who looks like a demon, slicing children apart and burning down buildings, and there's women and children crying on the side. Like, that's some real strange imagery.
Yeah, notice there's like a woman on the left there. She's kind of crying, holding maybe a possibly dead baby. I mean, there's somebody like sleeping next to the Nazi crazy guy that is about to kill some people. I don't know. And then there's a happy rainbow kind of whisking around, but maybe disappearing. So, like when it gets to the scary guy, it kind of the color goes out of it. So that's interesting. But anyway, again, all these images will be on troubledminds.org. So if you want to get a closer look, we'll have them all up, and you could follow up on the research we did here. Let's see. A couple comments. Stephen Ortega says, you guys should just write some sci-fi. Lots of loose ideas or speculations. Give it a literary format, some sort. Okay, I'm going to take that as okay. I'm not sure if that's a compliment or not. I'll take that as a compliment. Okay, so he's saying we should write some sci-fi. Okay, next picture. So here we got another one. It's there's a burning thing in the back. There's like a buffalo with like a medal on. It looks like a family in distress, or maybe not family, like a bunch of different people in distress, different nationalities. Some animals, whale jumping, a penguin. It's crazy. It's one of those things where I don't think you want like fire, things burning down, murals in airports. So we're gonna skip through these real quick. But so there's again, if you want to look at these, troubledminds.org, we'll have them up.
Let me just talk about this one for a second. This picture is fascinating because in the background, it could be like a nuclear strike, and all these children and people are gathering the animals in the glass boxes to take into the underground base, maybe. And, they have food and they have all these flowers and portraits and animals they're taking with them. But yeah, it could be that these things are there as kind of a signpost, so should all this bad stuff happen, well, this is where you go and this is what you do. But it's kind of hidden in the art, if you can see what I mean.
Yeah, definitely. Reading more of Stephen's post here, I think he's saying that our facts are low. But he says it's the goal is to be factual, post your sources, and let others evaluate them for themselves. Yeah, but I mean, I think that's why we want to include you. So that's why we've got a phone number up. We're completely transparent about this. If you want to call in and tell us we're full of crap, perfect. That's what we want. Like we're not here dictating answers, telling you what to think, telling you. I mean, we've taken dozens of sources and we're going through this information. So, I mean, we've tried. If you go back and listen to our shows, we've tried to be. We're trying to find our swag here, because if you go too factual and you're just reading facts constantly, it feels like classroom and everybody's bored and everybody leaves. So again, we're trying to include you. So if you got ideas, if you want to tell us we're full of it, or you think this is different than what we're talking about, perfect. Please call us. Get on Discord. Leave more comments. Like, these are the types of things we need to hear. And so we're just cruising through. So okay, this picture on the next picture. So then we've of course got some Masonic stuff happening. So I think notably right here it says New World Airport Commission. It's a little close to the New World Order, which I got a kick out of. And then there's another clicking over to the Braille. I don't read Braille, so I don't know what this is, but it does have the Freemason symbol, just as the other one does there. So so that's the Denver Airport. All kinds of crazy stuff. Again, if you want to follow up on the research we did, we'll have the links. We'll have all the things. So go to troubledminds.org and you can check it out. And so there you go. Anything else to add to Denver before we move on to New Mexico?
Yeah, let's keep moving on. And again, we're just showing you the evidence that we see. And these are like, don't tell me you're looking at that horse and thinking, okay, that's an appropriate statue to put outside an airport. Like, that's unbelievable that they have that there. Let's continue. Let's get into some of the even crazier stuff.
Okay, even crazier. All right, so we're going to go to Dulce, New Mexico. And let's see. Okay, so they've got apparently an underground military base or laboratory in Dulce, New Mexico, that it connects with the network of tunnels that we talked about previously, and apparently honeycombs the whole planet. Okay, and so this was reported by, what is this? Of course, Illuminati Symbols.info. I'm pretty sure you guys will like that.
It's a good source.
That's a good source. There you go. Okay, so and the lower levels are allegedly under the control of inner Earth beings or aliens. So that's where we're about to get. The base is connected to Los Alamos research facilities via an underground tube shuttle, which we talked about that previously, Mach 1.95. Beginning in 1947, a road was built near the Dulce base under the cover of a lumber company. No lumber was ever hauled, and no road. And the road was later destroyed. So, this has been a lot of speculation about this, about how different, let's say, species of aliens have actually lived in this area for quite a long time, before people even. Have you heard of this place there, Frank?
Yeah, it's interesting. They build these things in out of the way location. They try to cover their tracks, and then surrounding the environment, it always seems like there's these strange things going on. Like I know in Dulce there was cattle mutilations, a lot of that reported as well. People saw very strange lights in the sky. And so again, these are just reports, and we kind of go through what people have said about it, but it's very odd that around these bases there's always this symbology of terrible things, or there's these cattle mutilations and sightings and bizarre phenomena occurring. And so this is the Dulce base that we're getting into here, is where a lot of this goes down as we go into Phil Schneider and his accounts of what happened there. But it is quite interesting that this seems to be a hot spot for this paranormal activity or extraterrestrial activity.
Right, exactly. So, as you mentioned, the area around Dulce has a high number of reported animal mutilations, missing persons. They've got apparently people from their civilian population have implanted devices of various types in their heads and bodies. So this is all, again, these are, so the sources here we'll have links for, but you know, they're taking information from books and from other reports and interviews. And if you guys are interested in this, Dulce, New Mexico, check out Phil Schneider. Just Google him, and there's a ton of information. He did a bunch of interviews before he unfortunately passed away. But yeah, so we'll get to him in a sec. But what else here? Let me scan through. All right. Okay, so let's just get to Phil. So Phil Schneider, and he's got some history with Dulce, New Mexico. And he was an ex-government structural engineer, and he was involved in building underground military bases around the United States. And apparently was one of only 3 people to survive an incident that occurred in 1979 between gray aliens and U.S. military forces at the Dulce underground base. Let me play you that real quick. I got a clip. Him actually. So he actually went around and did a bunch of tours after he got out of his job. And there's some good reason for him getting out of the job. Here you go. There's a clip coming up.
In this process, I was lowered down the basket of one of these holes, and about from me to this elderly woman here in the front was sitting a 7-foot-tall alien gray. The stench was worse than the worst garbage can you can imagine. The person or the entity was absolutely horrible. I didn't waste any time. I reached for my pistol. At that time, as an engineer, I didn't have time to carry all the folderol of one of these big submachine guns that all the sea spray and the yellow fruit and all the outer perimeter and inner perimeter security people carried. I carried a little Walther PPK pistol with a 9-shot clip. This was in late August of 1979. Now, you got a regular suit of clothes, you got a regular clothes on, plus you're in almost like a spacesuit environment, and you're reaching for a gun. It's not the easiest thing to do, and then to pop a clip in it and start shooting. And I killed 2 of them. Yes, they're mortal, and they do die.
Well, there you go. The answer to some guy said or some guy did. So that's out of the horse's mouth. So that's an actual clip of Phil Schneider. He's speaking in front of a bunch of people. And, you know, whether he's full of it, again, that's why we're talking about this. For us to go through the story, we have to take him on his word that this is what happened. So, yeah. He was digging a tunnel. He ended up surprising, apparently, an alien base and got into a firefight. It
is interesting that this has actually happened more than once to him. Again, so his job with the government was to go down into these tunnels. He was a geologist and structural engineer, and he would, assess the rock and look at these things and tell them where to drill. And he would go down and inspect the site to help build these underground bases. And actually, I think we have another clip here. So he talked about that, or in that clip, about shooting and killing a gray alien, but he actually discovered reptilian aliens under the ground as well. So, yeah, in the process of his duties, that's what he would come across in these deep underground caverns is reptilian, humanoid extraterrestrials, as well as gray extraterrestrials. So do we have that reptilian encounter shooting clip?
Sure do.
But he told me about one of his encounters in the underground when we were doing a bore for preparation to build an underground base. They said the typical procedure was they bored a large diameter hole, large enough to run a captain's chair down through. It was about 6 feet or so in diameter. And it could be earth boring, it could be laser, it could be whatever. But they bore this hole down, it says, anywhere from 1 to 3 miles. The goal typically was between 1 and 3 miles, no less than 1 mile. But his job was, when they had it down to the depth they wanted, he would go down on the captain's chair, literally physically down in the borehole, and examine the rock structure at the bottom to see if it was a kind of rock structure that would be possible to use to create by blasting their underground base. He says more than once it happened that as they were boring, they hit an open area, an underground cavern system. And he was dropped down, the first one of these, where it happened that way, he was told get on the chair and go down and find out what's down there. Well, I took lighting with him. He said he didn't know what to expect. This is in his standard procedures of building the underground bases. You go down to the chair and go down to the left, get out of the chair. It's wandering around in a very dim cavern system, very foul air. Apparently sort of breathable, but very foul air. And with his lighting, he looked around there, and he thought he saw a shadow or something moving. He wandered around one of the corners of this cavern system, was face to face with an alien. He said he looked at it looked at him. If I remember correctly, he described it as a reptilian. But he says it went for something on his chest, some kind of a plaque or thing on his chest.
Now, he describes this story on...
Yeah.
But
he says he pulled out his 9mm Ruger that he had in his pocket. He wasn't supposed to have in the suit, but he had a hunch to take the gun with him that day, and he did, and he shot this thing dead before it got him. He said this happened more than once. This is when I'm saying private conversations.
Okay.
He was exploring these caverns when they hit them. When he went back up finally and told them what happened, he said he got the impression that they knew all about it. And he says eventually he learned the government knew where these underground caverns were and that they were inhabited.
Okay, so not just the one time, we got to multiple times here. It's a little off-putting.
Yeah, and that seemed to be his job anyways. Again, he was a geologist and an engineer, and he would explore these caverns and build these tunnels and, assess the rock and look at all these things. And when he was down there, he would encounter these entities, and oftentimes he would have to fight them. And so we did look into his credentials, and yes, he was a geologist and engineer. So everything lines up there. Yes, he did work with the government. But that's so all of this came out later in his life when he was kind of whistleblowing on them, when he was talking about all these things happening. But he described some truly terrifying things living under the ground.
Right, exactly. Couple comments real quick. Kelly says, his melted hand and the hole that blew his chest open that left him that scar. I believe him. We'll get to the scar. We got a picture. Todd says, supposedly the reptilian are the controllers of the Greys. Yeah, hadn't heard that. But again, good information. That's the type of stuff we like to hear. We can look into it and then explore some of it later. But yeah, so apparently aliens have been here for a long time. Apparently they're deep underground. Apparently, according to Phil Schneider and some others who have come out and corroborated, this is a thing. This is happening, and it's one thing to listen to a guy like Randy Kramer, right? So we talked about the Marines on Mars, and some of the things that he said. We did some clips from him. He did a ton of interviews, and it's hard to believe. And he doesn't have a lot of actual tangible evidence because of the time travel bit that he did. But Phil, on the other hand, Phil Schneider, he has some actual evidence. Here, I'll hit the fight here and what actually happened. At a clip.
One of them did this. All I remember is that he just kind of waved his hand in front of his chest, and the next thing I know, this blue beam hit me and just literally opened me up like a fish, and burnt my fingers right off of me. And it was some form of electrical force, because the kind of like being hit by a lightning bolt burned all my toenails off of me, completely crispy crittered my left foot. Burnt the shoe right off of me. All I remember is the smoking remains, and I'm still conscious, but in and out of, I didn't remember much. And there was a Green Beret that was right behind me that risked his life. In fact, he died. But he risked his life. He shoved me back in the basket and hit the button and took me up. And I wouldn't be alive talking to you today if it wasn't for him. I'm forever indebted. He lost his life. 66 Secret Service agents, Green Berets, Black Berets, crack troops lost their lives because the government, our United States government, lied, did not tell us anything about the alien threat.
Okay, so when he said the alien did this, he made a motion with his hand, kind of in front of his chest. And in other interviews, I saw that he described that they had some kind of device, maybe on their chest, like a necklace or something, and they waved their hands around it to activate it, and they shot him. Okay, and he also described in some other interviews that he put his hand out to stop this when he saw it happening, and it ended up cutting off, literally blasting through his fingers, and he's got like half a hand left. So if you guys haven't heard of this stuff, check it out, because there's a picture of his scar up on the screen right now. But that's a scar. That's a legitimate scar, and he's missing fingers. So, like, how else did that happen? I mean, did he get in a bad car accident? I just it to me it leads me to believe, at least follow him through his story a little more legitimately, in the sense that he's got wounds to prove this. It's not the Randy Kramer, I lost my leg and they rebuilt it and they time traveled me in this other business to where I'm perfectly fine right now, But I don't know. This guy was messed up. Did you see these scars, Frank?
Yeah, it's quite amazing. And yeah, he has the evidence. He has fingers missing from his hand. He has a scar on his chest. But more than that, what makes me believe him is the way he speaks. You can always tell kind of a crazy person by the way they speak. They'll throw in a lot of buzzwords and jargon, but they won't really give too much details. They won't really give too much new information. They'll just kind of reiterate what they've said before, what other people have said before. But if you listen to Phil Schneider talking, because he gave several lectures when he was whistleblowing these phenomena to the public, if you listen to him talk, he sounds quite intelligent. He sounds quite well put together. Doesn't sound crazy at all. And he's spewing out these details that seem unbelievable, but when you listen to him, at the very least, you can take away that he believes what he's saying. And I think that's an important consideration to make when you're kind of assessing these stories, is whether the person themselves believes what they're saying.
Yeah, and again, he's got wounds. We don't have pictures of his hand, but just Google Phil Schneider. You'll see it. He's he's got one hand that's almost completely blown in half. He's missing, I want to say, 3 fingers off the hand, and it is mangled. So something happened to this guy, and this is what he says happened to him. So it's hard to refute that when they got the wounds to prove it, Couple comments real quick. Kelly says that was Al Bialik talking about Phil. That was an earlier clip. I think I called you a she, Kelly. I apologize. I think you're a he. I just hover over the picture there. My bad. And then Chase says Denver International Airport, and then has a bunch of little zipper mouth emojis. So yeah. Does that mean you know something about Denver, or are you just saying we shouldn't talk about it, or elaborate, please? Thanks for showing up. But he's got the wounds to prove it, and he did a ton of these things, these talks at the quote end of his career after these wounds were healed and he barely escaped with his life and all this other stuff. So it's one of those ones where it's not easy to dismiss, let's say. It'd be one thing if he said, all this happened to me and I have no scars to prove it. But the dude has scars, man. The dude has scars. So, yeah. So there we go. Okay. Anything else to add there, Frank? To Phil and the scars and the alien fights and whatever else?
Yeah, we can go into another reason. Before we go into how he died and why that kind of lends credibility to his story, do we have a rough synopsis of the types of things he was saying that happened underground? Like what types of things were actually happening? Because we've given kind of a brief overview of him going down and fighting aliens, but did he make any other claims or any other things we should know about?
Yeah, okay. So check this one out. I got a quick video here. I'm going to play just the beginning, but he's talking about so with the aliens, according to Phil Schneider, they've been here for a long time, and they've actually got an agenda. Well, what is that alien agenda? And is our government aware of it? And etc. So here we go. Let's elaborate. So we're talking Duce, New Mexico, and Phil Schneider, the underground base. Okay. So here we go with the video clip where he describes what the aliens want from us. So, action.
I'm going to casually mention to you something that's very scary indeed, and tell you what the alien agenda is. And it's going to sound very familiar. The alien agenda is the complete takeover of this planet, the killing off of 5, 6 to 7/8 of the world's population by the year 2029. U.S. military has known about this for 45 years. They've told no one. As far as I know, I'm the only person standing before a crowd talking about the alien agenda, secretively. Okay. Back in 1954, I'll give you a quick overview. There was the created 1954 treaty where Eisenhower signed a pact with the known alien species of the time. There were 3 at the time. And said that we're going to deal in high technology, but you can take a few head of cattle and a few human beings and you can experiment on them. It's unthinkable. It's stuff straight out of the Nazi death camps, and I'm kidding you not, it's plain BS, and it's got to stop. Now, the created 1954 treaty had been violated. After the great firefight, the alien-human war, I am the only living survivor talking about it worldwide at all. Only one. The other 2 are in nursing homes in Canada, and the Canadian government refuses to allow any U.S. people, including myself, to talk to them.
Okay, that's a long clip. It goes on, but he continues on to say that the aliens themselves are actually using us as some sort of food. They want our blood and some kind of secretion from our pituitary gland. You heard this, Frank? It's like a crack to them or something, like some kind of that makes them high, in addition to the blood food that they're trying to get.
Yeah, no, that's interesting you say that. I've heard a lot about this adrenochrome, where there's some fear response and it releases this adrenochrome, I don't know if I'm pronouncing it correctly, into the brain. And, there was a lot going around recently about some of these, I'll try not to name the names, but some of these political figures engaging in these types of scenarios where they would terrify children and then harvest their pituitary gland to get this chemical. And I've never heard about it in the context of aliens before, so that's quite interesting that it lines up a little bit in that way. So that's an interesting little point you made there.
Yeah, he goes on to proclaim that. But again, if you guys haven't seen this, it's an interesting watch, one way or the other, right? So like we've had some fun watching some old Bob Lazar interviews and whatnot, and it's probably what kind of started this whole thing. Is talking about the discussion and some of the claims he made, and does he remember easily? Or is his memory being jogged by the guy sitting next to him type thing? Is he being prompted? And so again, you got to make up your own mind. But this guy did a ton. If you just Google his name, Bill Schneider, he's got a ton. He goes through and he's not just one conference, there's several. And he's talking about this type of thing. So a couple more comments. Kelly says, hell yeah, that's what I mean. He speaks the truth, talking about his injuries, I think. And then Stephen, just an observation, to each their own, but your ideas can easily result in compelling literary works. I'm sure you guys present some items you do not fully believe yourselves, and so can I accept the earnestness of the cast for what it is. Yeah, that's it. Again, more importantly, we're doing this because we want your ideas. And there's your ideas, and we appreciate it. And yeah, I've always wanted to write a nice fiction novel. How about you, Frank?
Yeah, definitely. And just to interject there, that's what we're kind of trying to do here. Is there's so much out there on the internet and in the news and in books and whatnot, and we're trying to summarize it, because all these things that we go into are rabbit holes. You could go down into them for days and weeks and months at a time before you were an expert on the subject. So what we do is we pick a topic and we try to bring all these disparate elements together, like the drilling in the caves and these underground bases, and we kind of try to present it in a very understandable way. So yeah, these things are real, and they're not our ideas. We're kind of synthesizing them and putting them together for you, but they're definitely real. And Phil Schneider and his story is really crazy.
Yeah, definitely. Let's say compelling. Couple comments. Kirill, if I pronounce that wrong, sorry, says go aliens. I agree. Todd agrees. Kelly says that's stories I've heard as well through my research, and I think talking about maybe the pituitary and the aliens and whatnot. And then Ellie says, what the hell? Agreed. What the hell? If they're actually trying to eat us somehow, use us as bags of blood, like vampires, like intergalactic vampires, There's your novel right there, Steven. We're gonna go for intergalactic vampires. But yeah, one more time. This is live, guys. You got comments? We want to hear them. Please call us 702-957-1037. If you prefer Discord, jump in. We'll bring you on to chat with us, and you can you tell us if you got an idea for a novel. Maybe we'll write it. Hop on in, give us your feedback. We appreciate all of it. All that feedback is good. So yeah, so here we are. We're at Phil Schneider. We're at deep underground bases. We went from Shasta to Denver to England to all over the world, and apparently these Mach 2 shuttles. We touched on Lemuria. We got a ton of stuff going on here, but this is not us. We didn't write this. This is not some fiction. This is these are people that apparently have stuck their neck out. Like for instance, Phil Schneider sticking his neck out to tell this story, and I don't say neck lightly. So he's got an interesting end. So Phil Schneider comes out after all of his working on these deep underground bases and having fights with aliens. Okay, he barely survives. He's got scars to prove the fight, and then what happens to him? Because he's no longer with us. Do you know what happened, Frank?
Yeah, so he's on this tour. He's lecturing. He's giving these talks about everything that happened, and then he kind of goes dark for a bit. He disappears, and his friend Al Pratt, he suspected something was wrong with Phil Schneider. So for several days in a row, Al went to Phil's apartment, and he saw his car in the parking lot, and he knocked on the door, but he never got an answer. And finally, and again, this is right in the middle of his conference tour where he's going around, he's talking to everyone, he's giving all this disclosure. But finally, what was the date? January 17, 1996, Al Pratt, along with the manager of the apartments where Phil Schneider lived and a detective, entered Phil Schneider's apartment, and inside they found his body. So he had been dead for 5 to 7 days, and they initially attributed his death to a stroke. However, in the following days, some really disturbing details began to surface about what happened to him and what led to his death. And some people suspect that he'd been murdered. So again, like Phil Schneider by himself, he tells a compelling story. It's very interesting, and he gives a lot of details, and he talks in a very confident manner, and so you tend to believe him. But then he dies. And to me, this kind of legitimizes the story a little bit more, because the way he died and the way his wife responded to his death and some of the incongruities in the coroner analysis, which we'll get to in a second, really kind of suggests that someone didn't want him talking. Someone wanted to shut him up. So yeah, let's keep going with this.
Okay, let me cut him real quick.
Go for it.
So before this happened, and I couldn't find the clip because there's so much. I was trying to find it, but apparently he's gone on the record and said that if he ends up dead of a suicide, then something happened, because he'd never commit suicide. So there's that. But go ahead. Just want to drop that in before we get to the final analysis here on Phil Schneider.
Yeah, so where were we at? So some suggest that he was murdered because he was leaking this information, and Phil Schneider himself claims to have avoided 13 of these murder attempts over his life during the course of time he was lecturing on these conspiracy theories. And he suffered from multiple illnesses. He had osteoporosis, he had cancer near the end of his life, he had those injuries that we talked about. But they officially stated that suicide was the cause of his death. However, his wife disagrees, and some of the analysis into this later is really strange. So the medical examiner took blood and urine samples at the autopsy, but refused to analyze them, saying they would not waste their money on a suicide. And although the samples would be kept for 12 months, when he asked for these samples to be sent, the researcher analyzing this, when he asked for these samples to be sent to an independent lab, they were missing or destroyed. So the way he died is also interesting. They initially attributed it to a stroke, but they actually found a rubber hose wrapped around his neck 3 times and then knotted off. And this is interesting, remember, because he had missing fingers on his left hand, and he had limited motion in his shoulders due to the osteoporosis. So it would have been physically impossible for him to have held the rubber hose in his hands and tie the hose around his throat 3 times. And based on where he was sitting, in order to end up where his body was, he would have had to sit on the edge of his bed, wrap the hose around his neck in a very slow and painful process. So it seems very strange. And apparently, because of all his illnesses and his education, he had a bunch of medication with him, and he knew how to use it. So he also had a gun too. So if he had wanted to kill himself, he could have either shot himself in the head, or he could have taken these pills. But the way he ended up dying was this rubber hose wrapped around his neck. So very strange.
Yeah.
Now, go ahead.
I'll just say red rum. Anybody familiar with that? Otherwise known as murder. All right, go ahead.
Yeah, definitely. So his wife actually came out with a couple of statements and went against this theory of suicide. So Philip and his wife met in 1986, and they had a daughter, and they were divorced in 1990. So short-lived marriage, but they were together for a while, and I think they still remained friends afterwards, especially with the daughter. So she received a call that Philip was dead in the apartment and had died up to a week before his body was discovered. And at the time, again, they attributed it to a stroke. Now, she went to the funeral home and she asked to view the body, but the funeral director wouldn't let her see the body. So she gives a number of points here. I'm kind of paraphrasing from a letter that's floating around the internet. Again, that'll be on troubledminds.org if you want to go check the full letter out. But she kind of comes to a series of points that it might not have been suicide, it might have been a murder. So the first point she makes is there's no suicide note. The second point she makes is that Philip always told his friends and relatives that if he ever committed suicide, you would know that he had been murdered. So again, the point you were bringing up before. And from a number of sources, including his taped lectures and statements and the borrowing of a 9mm gun, Philip felt that he and his family and friends were being threatened and were in danger because of these lectures. So again, he had warned his friends, he had warned his family, he had the gun with him, and he had avoided these murder attempts before. And so it was very strange that he suddenly died during the middle of this lecture series. When they investigated the apartment, this is the fourth point she makes, all of his lecture materials, his medals, his math books, his photographs of UFOs coming out of these underground bases, and his notes, because he was writing a book on the alien agenda that we heard a little bit about, they were all missing. They were all gone. But still in the apartment, he had his gold coins, his wallet with hundreds of dollars, jewelry, and mineral specimens. So all the things related to his lectures were taken, but all the valuables were left. That's very strange too.
Yeah, some of the stuff that I saw was talking about that the government actually had a small presence there after his death. And they came in and apparently, like Nikola Tesla, if you guys recall that, when he passed away, the government moved in and stole all his materials. So it's definitely suspicious in that sense that no valuables taken, just all of the information that he was trying to get out. Seems very X-Files, very Hollywood movie, right? Kind of scary stuff.
Yeah, definitely. Now, the fifth point she makes here is that no coroner actually came out to his apartment when the body was found. And apparently this is against Oregon law. The coroner has to come out to the apartment. And the police investigation never took under consideration the items that went missing. So they just considered it a suicide. They carted him off, and they didn't worry about all the missing things. And the wife, she goes on to make a sixth point here, is the medical examiner took the blood and urine samples of the autopsy, but refused to analyze them, again, saying that they would not waste their money on a suicide. And she says here, although I was assured the samples would be kept for 12 months, when I asked to see these samples and had them sent to an independent lab months later, they were missing or destroyed. Now, again, she makes the seventh point that we kind of talked about a little bit, is that he had limited motion in his shoulders and he had the missing fingers on his hand. So it would have been physically impossible to wrap the hose around his neck and tie it off. And that was the way he died, by strangulation. Now, she goes on to make an eighth point. Again, this is kind of what we were talking about before, is he was an expert in chemicals and his own medical needs. He had multiple pills at hand that could have ended his life quickly and painlessly. He also had a 9mm gun that he borrowed to protect himself. So why would he strangle himself in such an unusual manner? It's very strange.
It does seem peculiar. Yeah. I think I was going to talk about a History Channel, like a little
yeah,
little
go
bit
ahead.
thing.
Definitely go ahead.
Just a little bit of thing they had. It was one of them UFO shows, of course, and they had a dramatization. I can't even say it. They reenacted this, as a CIA guy coming in and kind of off on him, telling him he shouldn't be talking, and then wrapping a thing around his neck. Kind of a speculation, of course, but maybe not out of the question with some of the MK Ultra stuff we were talking about, and some of the CIA throwing people out windows and whatnot. So yeah, what do you guys think about Phil Schneider, the underground bases? Do you think this is something that's real? Do you think we got some shades of real and some shades of not real? What do you think about Phil Schneider himself with his actual wounds and his alien fights and his possible murder? They say it's a suicide, but it's probably 100 ways easier to suicide than strangling yourself. So I don't know. What do you guys think?
The wife kind of addresses that point a little bit. She says that Philip was religious and he actually didn't believe in suicide. So he had intense chronic pain all of his life. He was on disability. He had a housekeeper and he had cancer. So he was in pain all the time. But he didn't kill himself. So he could have killed himself 2 years before that or a year before that, but he decided not to. He struggled every day, not to die, but to live. So again, the timing is suspicious here, because if he wanted to take his own life, he would have several years before, again, because of this chronic pain. And he didn't. He struggled to stay alive. But during the middle of this lecture tour, where he felt he was making a big difference and he actually had hope for the first time in his life, that's when he dies. So it's really, really strange.
Yeah. Comment from Todd. He says, I think he was murdered. He was probably telling the truth. It seems like, right? Again, so there's some things about this story that are just don't sit right with me. It's one thing to hear a bunch of like ridiculous, outlandish stuff from some random guy that's trying to make a few bucks or whatever, like trying to carve out a retirement for himself or whatever. But I mean, like, what happened to this guy? Like, he's got that huge scar on his chest that, like, even if you get open heart surgery, you don't get a scar like that. Like, it's not something that's a normal scar that happens to people. I mean, that's serious business. And then to go with it, it matches him talking about putting his hand out to try and stop the beam reflexively, and then his fingers getting cut off by the beam that also hits him in the chest. I mean, it all seems to line up, at least in those details. And it's hard to completely discount somebody when they got scars like that, right? Yeah, like I said, doesn't sit right with me, this whole story. There's something weird about all of it. Yeah. So
especially the way he died, because again, like, this was the first time in years where he had felt hope. He was on his way up. He was giving these talks and a lot of people are coming, and he was learning about things and educating the public on the alien agenda. And then halfway through this tour, this series of lectures, he just kills himself. That doesn't make any sense. This would have been the most hopeful time in his life. This would have been the happiest time in his life. So for him to kill himself then is really, really strange.
Yeah, agreed. So we're gonna wind this down, guys. We're coming up on the end. But if you got any comments, you want to get on the show real quick, feedback is great. All feedback is great. 702-957-1037. Gonna keep spamming it till we get a call. I'd love to have somebody just call in and test the lines and say hi. That would be fantastic, because we're running these phone lines. We don't even know if they actually work. So please give us a call. If not, jump on Discord. We'll pull you in the channel, and you can tell us what you think about the show. Tell us what you think about Phil Schneider, about alien bases. We have more. We could go for another 2 hours. We have more. There's specific aliens that he's named. If you want names, look up Valiant Thor from Venus. He's actually named aliens that apparently work with the Pentagon and have for dozens of years. So there's some crazy stuff with this story, and it seems like the more you look into it, the more it leads to, right? Like I couldn't just end it. It just kept the next thing, and then the next thing, and then the next thing. It's a pretty crazy one. It's like I said, unsettling a little bit. But yeah, we're winding this down, guys. So if you got any comments, please, you know where to find us. And troubledminds.org. Help us with the social stuff, the thumbs ups and the comments. All that stuff helps. Tell your friends, tell your family about us, tell your enemies about us. We'll be nice to them. And listen to our old shows. You can find us on Stitcher. You can find us on iTunes. You can find us on we stream live on Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook here. So if you guys are watching anywhere, follow us in all the places. let everybody know, and we appreciate that. If you got feedback on the shows, which Steven had some great feedback, I appreciate that. We're trying to find a good balance of facts and storytelling, because just facts, reading off somebody's website, anybody can do that, and it's boring. You end up feeling like you wasted your time. But we're trying to include you. We're trying to get those comments. We're trying to get the calls. That's why we're here. That's why we're doing this. That's why we set this entire thing up. That's why we record live. So we do the ums and the ahs. We do the not saying the perfect thing all the time with the scripts and whatever. We do this because we want it to be a live scenario, so you guys can give us a call, so that you guys can be a part of the situation, so you guys can actually tell us what you think as we go. So that's why we do it. We're not trying to make this a perfect thing, because if we did, we'd just record in a vacuum and then edit everything, and then great music and all the other stuff the podcasters do. But we're going more for like a live internet radio show. So it's not as easy as it looks. So we appreciate the feedback, and we are trying to get better. So there's that. Anything else?
Let me jump in there for a second. Negative feedback is good too. Like, we do appreciate that. Like, we're looking at these things and we're trying to put them together. But if you see a chink in the evidence we presented, or if you think it's all nonsense, let us know. Like that last episode we did, I kind of went in, which was mind control. I kind of went into it thinking that MK Ultra and all this kind of mind control stuff was just nonsense. It was entirely made up silly stories that circulate around the internet. But by the time I had finished my research, I was kind of horrified by these things in the witness testimony. So, if you could call in and tell us that mind control was false, I'd actually like to hear that. I would love to hear that. So, we're open to criticism. So feel free to comment or leave an email or call in, or let us know.
Right, exactly. So again, if you like the show, you know where to go, troubleminds.org. All our socials are there, so like everything, and you'll know when we'll go live. We're trying to get a schedule here. It's tough because we're hard-working men, so we don't sit around picking our toes making shows all day. So we're making this happen because we want this to happen. This is a pet project. This is fun for us, and more importantly, we want to include you guys. So all the great comments are fantastic to this point. All the participation is amazing. It means a lot. Try doing a show by yourself with nobody watching or nobody commenting, and you'll see what I mean. And so far so good. Another comment from Steven, who had the great feedback earlier. He said, well, this far in, the asking yourself, what if, can get a mind going. Yeah. I think you literally just boiled this whole show down to one statement. Like, that's exactly why we do this. And hey, we got a caller. Let's get a caller here real quick. See if I can make this thing work. Caller.
Kelly Valdez.
Hey, what's happening? Kelly, can you hear us?
Hey, good show. It's the first time I ever seen it through the Little Green Man on Facebook, so I had to call in. Been pretty interesting what you guys been talking about with Phil Schneider.
Fantastic. I appreciate you calling. The phones work. Can you hear him, Frank?
Yeah, I can hear him. He sounds good.
You sound good.
Again, thanks for the feedback.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. By the way, my name is Kelly Valdez. I call a lot of different and follow different radio shows. Have to do with alien or any kind of agenda like that, or just bizarre. I'm glad to hear see you guys. I caught you guys online. So the only thing I'd like to add is Phil Schneider. Yeah, I've seen his videos, like the ones you guys were posting and talking about earlier. He's actually a pretty interesting man. I believe him. I believe he's telling the truth. Only because it's what your visitor is also talking about is how he talks, how he represents himself. You can tell when somebody, most people could tell, like, people would just be talking more or less out their ass. But I believe Phil Schneider is telling the truth when he's talking about the Dulce base and what happened.
Yeah, again, it seems suspicious, right? in the sense that he's not making it's not one single narrative. He does get some details wrong, like he's recalling from memory, and there's a lot of the suspicious stuff, like the actual wounds, the manner of his death, the fact that he told friends previously, if I die of suicide. I mean, again, like I said, it doesn't sit right with me. There's something about this story that just seems off. Anything there, Frank?
Yeah, definitely. I think the way he died really pointed the finger at me, because his wife knew him quite well, and there's all these incongruities in the way he died. So it is really suspicious. He was on his way up, and then he just took his own life. It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, totally. Hey, Kelly, real quick. So you say you listen to a lot of this type of radio streams, podcasts, whatever. What are some of your favorites? I'm curious. I like Clyde Lewis a lot. Who do you listen to?
Yeah, I've actually just do a lot of there's a group there's two brothers out there called Third Phase of Moon, and then another one that I listen to. Her name's Christina George. She does some stuff as well. We're talking blogs or whatever, but yeah. Also, I listen to a lot of readings that are off of Facebook. That's or YouTube, I should say. The name. The guy does all those readings. Remember?
Okay,
sorry, kind of like off the top of my head, I forget his name, but
that's okay. That's okay. Just curious, because there's a ton of stuff like this out there that it's hard to get out, right? Because doing the show is one thing, but marketing the show is another thing entirely, and getting in front of people is one of those things. So yeah, just curious who you're listening to and kind of where you found him.
Yeah, there's also like Al Billick. That's another one on YouTube that I listen to. Al Billick or Boyd Bushman, some of those guys like that. Al Billick is one that was he claims him and his brother that was part of the Philadelphia experiment. That's when I was kind of like when I was talking in the cube that that was Al Billick talking about Phil Schneider.
Okay.
Do you guys know about Al Billick?
Yeah, a little bit. So I think that's one that we'll do in the future here with the Philadelphia experiment, because I think Phil Schneider's father worked on that, right?
Correct.
Yeah, I believe he did. Yeah, he worked with Al Billick, and his father was actually thought to be a Nazi, brought over by the American government. So that's a whole another fascinating topic we'll have to save for another time. But the Philadelphia experiment goes real deep, and that's one I'm excited to get into.
Yeah. So Kelly, you're our first official caller. So what do you think our next show should be?
What have you guys talked about?
We've done a lot. Conspiracy theory. We've done alien abductions. We've done Bigfoot. We've done just you name. Check out the YouTube. You can see what we've done. But again, so we're just starting here. This is like episode 13, I believe. So we're kind of painting the picture of where we're gonna head eventually, with the cryptozoology, the aliens, the deep state stuff, the Illuminati, which we haven't even touched on yet. So we're kind of getting there. I think Philadelphia experiment's a good one to hit. What do you think?
Yeah, there's also you guys know obviously about Linda Moulton Howe.
Yes.
Yeah, she does some stuff too with cattle mutilations, but yeah, she was on another radio show, and we were discussing some of that. But not only that, was like also I brought up through my research, there was a couple of guys that had been human mutilization, where it was almost kind of like what they did with the cow, but missing parts of one of the men they found. So it was pretty interesting.
Yeah, she's been on that
whatever
for years.
You guys, now that I caught you guys on, I'll be probably following you guys as well.
Okay, we appreciate that. Appreciate the call. We'll do some Philadelphia experiment. We'll do some Linda Moulton Howe. I don't think we're big enough to get on the show yet, but hopefully one day we will be able to. So I'll start reaching out to these people, and you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, if you guys need help, I can get some numbers for you guys. If you guys need to reach out to get some of these guys on your radio show,
that'd be amazing.
Interesting. That's always cool.
That would be amazing. You know where to find us, man. I'll send me a message on this page afterward, and I'll get you back. I appreciate it. Thanks for the call, Kelly.
All right. You guys take it easy, man, and good show so far. And me and the wife will be listening from now on.
Thanks a lot for listening. Have a great night, Kelly.
All right, guys. All right, have a good night.
Thanks, you too. All right, so anybody else, I'm about to wind this down. Thanks for the call, Kelly. We appreciate it quite a bit because we haven't had our phone lines work yet. So now we know they work. Frank can hear everything. And I'm assuming everybody in chat, did you hear the call fine? Everything working? This is a first. So Troubled Minds Radio first. Todd.
Yeah, that was fascinating. I had never heard about human mutilations in the context of cattle mutilations. So I'm going to have to read up on that really soon because that's something that incredibly interesting. I had always assumed that aliens would be mutilating humans and not cattle. Why would they focus on cattle? So I'm going to have to look into that.
Yeah, so Phil Schneider said that they were doing cattle because it was part of the agreement with Eisenhower back in the day. That was part of the initial agreement, which was called the Treaty of Grenada, I believe. So they were allowing them to take cattle, but not humans. And apparently they started taking humans and causing like a hostile work environment, I guess you could say. So anyway, more good stuff. Thanks, Kelly. That it tickles me that the phone lines work and everything's good. Almost sounds like we're a real radio show. So about to wind this down. If anybody else wants to call in, we'll stay on for another minute or two and then hit the outro. Anything you want to add there, Frank? And anybody in chat, if you could hear that call and all the audio was good, please let us know because that's important. I'll find out after the fact, of course, because I'll re-listen. But it's good to know how it sounds live instead of re-edited or whatever. And Todd says Lost Book of Enki. He wants that as a topic, so we can add that to the list. We can do Lost Book of Enki. We can do the Philadelphia Experiment and all kinds of other stuff. So, yeah, so far so good, I think. Anything else to add, Frank?
Yeah, let's start wrapping this down, or winding this down. But I find it interesting that if you were to approach a news organization in this day and age with some of your personal experiences or your personal stories, you'd just be laughed at, or they wouldn't pay attention to you at all. They would ignore you. But I think that the people out there, they're the ones experiencing these things, and to discount them as crazy or discount them as making things up for attention, it does them a disservice. And I think we're losing knowledge by ignoring the stories of the people. That's what we're all about, is your stories and these stories we can dig up. So again, if you do have, now that we know our phone lines work, if you do have personal stories or personal experiences, feel free to call in and talk about them, and we'll take them as seriously as you want to.
There you go. And one more time before we end this, I'm going to hit the outro here real quick. But so if you guys have instances that are strange, anomalous, you've seen aliens, you've had out-of-body experiences, you've had a creepy experience with a Ouija board, things like this, like you can actually have like a first-hand account. That's what we want to hear. We could do just like Kelly there and get you on for 5-10 minutes and talk about these things, and we could even schedule it and make it part of a whole show. So if you've seen UFOs, we can get you scheduled up and get you on the show and talk about these things, because again, that's what we're here for. That's what part of the conversation is. That's why we're doing the entire thing. So thank you again, Kelly, for calling in. That means a lot. Thank you again, Todd, Stephen, Allie, all the way up the line. I can't scroll all up and hit everybody. I hit everybody on the way down, so I'm not going to do it on the way up. But we appreciate you guys listening. We appreciate all of the support. We appreciate all of the comments. And if you want to help us a little bit more, it doesn't cost you a penny. Just go to our site, troubledminds.org, and like all the things, make comments on all the things, tell your friends about all the social things, and it helps us. All that helps us. So you see what a great call Kelly was? We can get more of that. And if you guys want to be on the show, you know where to find us. Anywhere, troubledminds.org. Send us an email, troubledmindsradio@gmail.com, and we can schedule you to be on the show as an expert or a quick guest or what have you. So, got a couple comments. Allie says cryptids, I'm going to skinwalkers and wendigos. So there you go. Stuff to look at. Anything else, Frank?
Nope, let's end it.
Okay, so thanks for listening, guys. You're listening to Troubled Minds Radio. I'm your host, Michael Strange. I'm here with your co-host, Frank Pierce, and we'd like to say thanks for listening. Have a great night.